Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of season 2 of Wherever the Wind Blows. My name is Morgan Guigon. I am one of your two hosts today. I am the owner and founder of South Florida Storm Chasers, and I'm glad to have you with us. And we also have Christopher Estep. Hello, Chris.
Hey, hello. I'm Chris, founder of Westside Tornado Chasers, and I guess my son's right here, Clifton, the crazy one.
And with this episode today, as a viewer, you may notice a few different things. I actually have no control over where the camera goes now. I decided after last episode that I won't control it. I'll just let it go with whoever's speaking. So that's just one of the new kind of upgrades we're doing. And then today we also will have Kevin Selle, a meteorologist out of North Texas, and also the co-host of very popular weather podcast, WeatherBrains. So it is great to have him on today, and I definitely look forward to having him on, and it'll be very interesting, some of the things that will be talked about. So, anything you have to say, Chris?
Oh, I mean, the guests and stuff, so got some questions from him as well. So,
and to all of our viewers who viewed yesterday morning's podcast, I'd like to issue sort of an apology for everything that went on. So that, and Mr. Kevin Selle joins us. Welcome.
Hey, how you doing?
Pretty good. How about you?
Good. It's Selle, by the way.
Selle. Thank you.
Thanks for the invite.
It's great to have you on with us.
Appreciate that.
Now, Kevin, can you quickly give all of our viewers just a quick background on who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm the chief meteorologist at KFDX, which is the NBC affiliate in Wichita Falls, Texas. I've just been here a couple of months. Prior to that, I was chief at Texas Cable News in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, which is a statewide cable channel. Let me get on a better microphone here.
Snowflake. Save. Hopefully that sounds a little better. Prior to that, I was in Richmond, Virginia, the chief, and did mornings at the CBS station in Richmond, also where I met my wife. She was doing weather for the NBC station, so that caused a little bit of interesting conversation with two meteorologists dating each other and eventually getting married. And prior to that, in weather, I was with James Spann at at the time, the ABC affiliate in Birmingham, Alabama.
And just a quick assumption, that's how you and James Spann started WeatherBrains.
Well, no, actually, he started that after I left. I was actually a disc jockey in Birmingham when James and I met. I was the afternoon drive guy at the adult contemporary station in town, and James was doing our weather. And so he and I met, and we got to be friends, and he got me involved in weather with the Mississippi State program and let me work with him as an intern for a couple of years. And pardon me, I got a cold. Getting on the backside of a cold here. He let me intern with him for quite some time. I would go over there in the evenings and learn the weather and how to draw weather maps on TV and things like that. And once the weekend job came open, they were nice enough to give me a chance to do it. And James started, WeatherBrains has been going, 7 or 8 years now. It's been, over 20 since I started with him. But WeatherBrains is, I think, probably about 8 years old now. He started that based on seeing a guy by the name of Leo Laporte at the This Week in Tech network, or TWIT network. And he saw Leo doing podcasts. He said, hey, that's a good idea. So he started it there in Birmingham.
And then how did you grow to become the co-host?
Well, they had actually started amongst their group in Birmingham. I had left there. I was in Richmond at the time. And, well, let me think. No, I guess I was back in Dallas at the time. And he started it with a guy by the name of David Black, who was part of the weather company, which James runs, Bill Murray, who was part of his infrastructure there, J.B. Elliott, longtime Weather Service employee, and a couple of people all started together at the same time, John Olshoe as well. And they started it, and I think it was 6 or 7 months before I joined. I was the first one to join from outside of Alabama. And we've got a great crew in there now. Rick Smith from the National Weather Service office in Norman, the WCM there. John Scala from up in Pennsylvania, former Weather Channel person. Aubrey Urbanowitz is in the mountains of Virginia in the Charlottesville market. And who else? Nate Johnson from Raleigh. And Brian Peters, former Weather Service. And JB retired a couple of years ago. And I hope I'm not forgetting anybody, but it's a great, great crew.
It is. I love watching WeatherBrains. I mean, it's extremely informative, and it's a good way to kind of bring down something that most people sometimes only see on TV for 5 or 10 minutes to more of this extended version where you can learn a lot more.
Well, I appreciate those comments, and we try to have kind of a mix of fun and information. Maybe sometimes a little too much fun, but yeah, as you mentioned, you get to see some of the personalities involved and maybe a little bit deeper side of some of the people that you see on TV, which maybe is not always a good thing.
But at the same time, it allows for the viewers to...
Wait a minute. I'm sorry, start your question again. Something happened with I tried to plug in my earbuds, but I think they're dead.
But at the same time, it allows for the viewers to create more of a personal connection with these people that they normally only see for 5 minutes on television.
Well, that's a really good point about, I think, digital media and social media, where it gives us a chance to provide a little bit more personality than we might otherwise get on television, as you're talking about. And James has kind of been expanding and exploring that a little bit on their 4 o'clock news. He's doing less of the traditional show where he draws a bunch of maps that people may or may not remember, and he's showing a lot more social media content. He's showing some more forecast model content. I know he shows graphics from Weather Bell and things like that, and it seems, based on his reports, that people are seeming to like the more conversational aspect of it. Pam Huff, the anchor person at the Channel 4, at the 4 o'clock news rather, she joins him in the Weather Center, and they have more of a conversational relationship and presentation, and people seem to be responding to it, according to James, at least the younger demographics, say 50 down, seem to be enjoying it. He says there's a little bit of pushback from the older demographics, and it may be that they just are a little bit more resistant to change.
Yeah, and I can definitely agree with that, because change is big, but it also means that maybe this is the next new way to provide weather information to the general public, of this conversational piece where it's not just maps and numbers on a screen that they're going to say to you and then that's it.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that's an excellent point. I think a lot of people do like to have a little bit closer relationship with the people that are providing them the information, and on television. By the same token, and this is one of the things I learned years ago, now that we're moving further and further into digital, it's a real good book called The Long Tail, written back in the early to mid-2000s by Chris Anderson. And one of the things I learned from that book was that in a world of nearly infinite choice in the digital space, you can no longer say people want X. You have some people who want X, and some people want Y, and some people want Z. And in a world, like I said, of infinite choice and an infinite number of channels, you can kind of go out and seek what you look for. And so it's a little bit hard for an old model like us broadcasters who just had the one distribution channel, that was the television station, and you spoke to many people. You didn't really get very much feedback, and they didn't have any choice. There was nowhere else for them to go. So this has been kind of a difficult transition, I think, for broadcasters, because the audiences are getting smaller, and so it's harder to monetize a smaller audience unless you can some way aggregate them into a larger group, maybe by collecting, several different smaller groups. As far as the social media goes, I have been pretty outspoken against the use of social media in a number of ways, and I get the value that it does bring. I mean, James often says, prior to Twitter, he couldn't buy a storm report from out in the outer reaches of his designated market area because there just wasn't much communication available. But now he gets pictures from all over and storm reports from all over, and I certainly agree with that. I wish we had sort of developed that infrastructure as an industry on our own a little bit more quickly, rather than ceding that responsibility to Twitter and to a certain degree Facebook. And Facebook is just a terrible way to get weather information because of the filtering algorithm, and I don't know how many people know what goes on that algorithm. We've studied it quite a bit, but basically what's happening is your news feed is based on your behavior and a bunch of different factors that decide how to narrow down the number of things you see in your feed. It's suggested that the average person, based upon who they follow and how many people, could see as many as 1,500 messages per day, which is unmanageable. And Facebook's trying to get that down to, in theory, more of a manageable 300. So based on your behavior and what you like and what you comment on, they will try and pass similar content to make a good experience for you. But the net effect of that for us is that, you know, I mean, worst case scenario, you see graphics go by that have severe thunderstorm warnings on in somebody's news feed that's 2 or 3 days old, and that's clearly not very helpful. So I wish we had not gone in that direction, but we did. I do see some signs of the industry trying to take it back a little bit, and that's one of the things I'm hoping to do here in Wichita Falls.
Well, I see the reasoning behind that. Social media does really affect the way that information is sent across. I mean, you have people who can turn around, they can post whatever they want, and you can have well-educated people coming and saying, oh, hey, you know, this isn't right, or hey, this is wrong, or something like that, and that information isn't going to get across because it's already been shared hundreds of thousands of times, and it's already across the entire internet. Once something's on the internet, it's just going to grow like wildfire if people attach to it.
Yeah, and I think that in some ways can be a good thing, in some ways can be a bad thing. It does create a lot of chaos. It's non-filtered, and what I mean by that is anybody can post whatever they want. And there are a number of people who post outrageous weather things that then get passed around, and that's fairly frustrating, especially for a lot of broadcasters, because not only do they have to do their regular jobs, in which their responsibilities have really grown over the past couple of years, because you have to post to Facebook and Twitter, and you have to do a website, and you have to do the TV show, and a number of things. But now, a lot of us spend time, you know, swatting down rumors, which is kind of frustrating.
Oh, and I can definitely see how that would be extremely frustrating, and it just brings forward such of a problem to get accurate information across when you have people who just don't want accurate information. They want information that is easy to be shared, or to just turn around and start a conversation about or an argument about.
Yeah. Yeah, and you bring up a real good point, and Rick Smith from Norman has brought this up a number of times, and I know other people in the Weather Service have brought it up as well. He brings up a couple of bullet points. Number one, he said you should make some effort to know who your forecaster is, who that person is that you're getting that information from. Is it something or from someone that just kind of happened to zoom by in your feed, or is it somebody that you have some sort of relationship with? You've watched them for a long time. You know that they're providing good, solid information. So the idea of knowing your forecaster is pretty good. And then the really, really neat thing I think he says about this is, if it doesn't smell right, don't share it. If you don't know the forecaster and it sounds outrageous, even if it sounds somewhat plausible, by all means don't share that, because that's how those things spread, and they create quite a bit of confusion. I remember a couple of years ago, after the big tornado outbreak in Alabama, 2011, and later that year the NWA had their convention in Birmingham, and they had a town meeting where people could come and comment, and a couple of experts and societal impact people talked, but they had an open mic period where people could get up and make comment. And I remember very vividly, I think about this every day since then, there was a woman, probably easily in her 60s, got up to the microphone, and her comment that stuck with me was, she said, well, when I heard that there were tornadoes around, I started searching around on Twitter. And my heart sank because I thought, I really don't want this woman in James Spann's market. I mean, here she's got, the #1 television and media guy in the country providing weather information for her. I really am not interested in her sifting around on Twitter looking for valuable information at that point in time. Her nephew might have posted that he's eating cheese, but I don't think she needs to know that at that point in time. And what I would rather have had her do was go to a known, credible source of information.
And between that and not only is social media not, credible most of the time because you can have 4 different people saying 4 different things, but then also, especially in the event of a severe storm or tornado, you have people who are under it who are trying to live tweet from it, who are over exaggerating, and then you have people who see things that aren't there, and that causes panic.
Yep.
And then when something doesn't happen and the general public then just turns around and decides, I'm going to doubt what I heard because to me it doesn't seem to be true anymore.
Right. No, that's a really good point, and it goes back to knowing. I kind of look at both Facebook and Twitter. I think maybe the big benefit is that if we looked at these as a notification, an early, very peripheral notification system, where you see something going by on Twitter or Facebook that says, hey, here is something for weather that you need to be paying attention to, but then immediately go to a better, more credible source. I know that's probably a little bit naive to say that I wish everybody would do that, but that is my hope. I know it won't happen. But I would like for people to just look at it as a notification system, to be very careful about what they share and what they take as gospel as opposed to something that might just be internet hype. And I understand, somebody posts, photoshops a picture of, a tornado sucking up a bunch of sharks out of the ocean. Well, that's fun to look at, and I guess it's fun to share, but there's a line that's crossed, and sometimes it does create some difficulty. But I understand people are gonna share that stuff.
Yeah, and it's just human nature, sadly, to say that if you see something that instantly intrigues you, you're going to turn around and say, oh, hey, I know my friend's going to like this, so I should share it to them. But then it's going to get shared and shared and shared. And if you word how you're sharing it wrong, then it's going to turn around and go from knowing that this is fiction to somebody finding out and saying, hey, yeah, this really happened. And then when credible people are saying, no, it didn't, there's already so many people saying it did that the credible, reliable sources just end up getting shot down, sadly.
Yeah. No, you are completely right. That's, again, one of the reasons that I have been kind of outspoken against it. I know the horse is out of the barn. And I do, like I say, see some signs. I think that some companies are trying to not put the horse back in the barn, but at least bring some of these better communication tools closer in-house rather than relying on the whims of Facebook and Twitter.
And it's now just a question of how will these younger generations react to that, to the pullback to how it used to be when, I mean, most people I know under 20, they all have a social media account, and they're all either, texting away on their cell phone and looking on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and whatever they can get their hands on.
Yeah.
And half the time that's where rumors and false images start and are shared from.
Yeah. No, I have done 3 speeches in the last week or so at Midwestern State University, which is the one of the colleges here in town, to one of the mass communication classes. And I really appreciated the opportunity because in addition to sharing some weather information, I asked them to share some of their habits with me because these are college kids, right? Most of them are 18, 19, 20, 21, whatever it is. And it's very helpful for me to hear what their habits are, where they do get their information, what apps they use, what apps they don't use, how often they look at weather information. Because I kind of feel like at the end of the day, as broadcasters, and I should say it's sobering to ask those questions because you go into a class like that, and I asked them to be completely honest, and you can have, I don't know, 20, 25 people in a class, and one of the first questions I ask, I say, okay, how many people watch the local TV news every night? And not a single hand goes up. And I say, well, how about 3 times a week? And not a single hand goes up. And then I say, well, how about once a week? And maybe 1 or 2 hands tentatively go up. They somehow catch the local news. But as far as the digital space, I think we have to take some responsibility for it. If we're not producing, if we were producing motivating content and useful content on our digital properties, then people would come. That's just kind of a reality.
Well, it brings up the question of, with what these younger generations watch and look at. I mean, you have Netflix and Hulu and whatever's on TV now, what they're looking at. How do you turn around and try to either relate to that or get the message out that this is just as important as your favorite TV show that you're going to watch now, instead of the local news on a night where you know there's severe weather possible?
Sure. Well, and that goes back to, I think, maybe using social media as a notification system. Put that message out there. Hey, look, something big is happening. I would love for you to pay attention, and here's where you go to do it. On a day-to-day basis, you know, like here in Wichita Falls in the summertime, it's going to be 100 degrees for most of the summer, and there's not a snowball's chance in you-know-where of any kind of rain activity or thunderstorm activity. And so they're not going to come. That's why the local news was an interesting package back in the day, in the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s to a degree, because it was a package of different pieces of information. I think the problem that we've run into now is that, for the most part, again, in a world of infinite choice, what you're doing on a local newscast is saying, hey, here's a bunch of stories that we hope that you are interested in or that somehow affect your life. And that's very difficult to do. Some of the stuff will affect or be of interest to a couple of people, but with the idea, or with the fact that they can go off and get so many other choices, Netflix or Hulu, like you said, they're just going to go. So that idea of notification, I think, is pretty important. And then having a place, a consistent place, where you're posting regular information, not just on severe weather days, but every day, and let them know, okay, I'm looking for some sort of weather information, just even to know whether it's cold outside. What they need to know is that they can rely and depend on my brand on whatever device of their choosing to provide that information, even when it seems maybe it's not even necessary on a quiet day.
And even when it comes down to that, I mean, one of the big epidemics now is the social meteorologist, where it's people on social networks who they turn around, they see something from a qualified meteorologist such as yourself, and they say, oh, I'm going to take this bit of information, combine it with this other bit of information, and turn around and throw my own forecasts out there. So now you have 2 reliable sources and then 1 unreliable one. But that one unreliable one is forecasting death, while the other 2 are forecasting, you know, they're being accurate and actually in the ballpark. But what are they going to share? They're going to share the one that is the most dramatic, like those TV shows on Netflix and Hulu. Yeah.
No, that's a great point. It kind of goes back to it, and I know I'm not suggesting we can put the horse back in the barn, and it's, you know, it may sound as though I'm being naive to say, well, you know, people just need to come to our platforms because they are more reliable. The reality is that some won't, and this was one of my big frustrations about why we went into these platforms, I think, without thinking of the net effect down the road. I think what happened was Facebook started as whatever Facebook was. It was on college campus and started at Harvard and so on and so forth. And then it just grew very, very rapidly. And in general, I think the media kind of looked at social almost the same way it looked at the web in the early days of the web and went, oh, okay, well, we're the big 900-pound gorilla in town. We don't really need to fool with this. But then both the web and Facebook hit critical mass, where all of a sudden there was a big audience there. And so we were rushing in going, oh my gosh, we got to be here. What's going on? There's stuff going on, and we're not in control of it. And so we're losing our ability to send out our message, and went rushing in. And I think some of the early adopters of that are probably to blame for that. But again, you know, I think they saw an opportunity to reach an audience, which is commendable, I suppose. I do just wish we hadn't gone in that direction, because what it did was give some credibility to those platforms. Oh, okay, well, James Spann is on Facebook, that must be okay. But the problem with an open platform like that is anybody can have a page and say whatever they want. So I think we're a little bit responsible for creating that chaos. But you know, it happened so quickly that I don't guess we had time to think it through.
I think it was just the straight, all right, this is critical mass, this is such a large group of people that we need to rush in and go capture, and they just went in without thinking about it, of large group of people, we need a larger audience because now the audience has moved over here because they can go and check this on their cell phone while walking down the street, but they can't watch the news necessarily while walking down the street. So they went in and tried to capture that, but went in extremely rough and quickly.
Yeah, and you're exactly right, and then we started to look around and go, oh wow, what is it that we've done here? Was this a mistake? But if it wasn't a mistake, I mean, why didn't we rush into Pinterest? Right? Why doesn't every television station, and a lot have, you know, some presence somewhere, but why aren't we pushing all of this information into Pinterest? Because it has a huge audience. I think it might even be bigger than Twitter. It has a very desirable audience because some large percentage of it is females, which is of interest to advertisers. But we didn't go rushing in there because we didn't belong there. And I think in many ways, I'm disappointed in Facebook's behavior, because I think they have everybody by the throat. They were the first one to effectively get everybody to network with their friends and family. And now they're leveraging people's personal relationships in order to run their business model, which I think is unfortunate.
And it really is, because it would be such a great source for a notification system or something in that ballpark, but by the fact that either people rushed in too quickly and didn't think about the long term of, here, this is what this could potentially grow into, or between that and the, all right, we can maybe do this, but this is a better way to capture the critical mass that lives on here.
Yep. Morgan, you are wiser than your years, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I think Chris is asleep down there. I may have bored him to death.
We may have lost his webcam. His webcam's been on and off.
Excuse me.
Oh, it's fine. I had the same cough about 2 months ago.
Yeah, I had mine about 2 weeks, and I went to the doctor last week, and that didn't seem to help. So I went again today and got 2 different shots in the buhunkus, and hopefully that will help me out here.
And quick shift back to the actual conversation of, before we go too far down that road.
No more buhunkus talk.
Yeah. I mean, one of the best cases to me is back in May of 2013, the Moore, Oklahoma tornado, and how well managed that was on social media. I remember that morning seeing the National Weather Service in Norman put out that this is another dangerous day, and to be careful, and that storms would be at the worst around, you know, dismissal time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was probably one of the best uses of social media so far, to warn in advance while also not setting anything in stone.
Right. No, that's a good point. And again, like we've been talking about, it's a notification system. I think that is a great use. The difficulty and the problem comes when people start getting a little crazy and run up and down the halls with their hair on fire, and that just doesn't do anybody any good.
And there's that problem, and then between that and because there's no cap on it to say,
Yep. Right.
you can't cap this infinite world of social media. You can say whatever you want. You can say, hey, I recommend you not to follow this, this, and this person, or listen to what this person's saying, but then it just comes out as if you're on the wrong end here, and you're saying this just because of audience and blah, 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 blah.
Yep. No, that's right. I had a real interesting conversation, was it last year or the year before, with the guy who built Google Plus at Google. He's gone from there now, and my old brain has, his name escapes me. It'll come to me in a minute. But he was I mean, he was high up in Google. And I reached out to him one day, and he was very generous to give me about a half hour on the phone one day to talk about weather and Google Plus. And he taught me something fairly interesting. You know, one of the thing that I was hoping for in the conversation was to say, hey, we're using Google Plus and we like it a lot. Here's what you could do for us to make it better for weather people. And he appreciated the conversations, was interested in it, but he made me understand that on a global platform like Facebook or Google Plus, the minute that you fork your product and do some favor for one little special interest group, you're dead, because every other special interest group is going to want their favor as well, and that just doesn't scale on a global platform.
But I definitely think that in this kind of situation where Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and whatever can tell where you are, your pinpoint location,
yeah,
at any given moment. I mean, even Google, you make a Google search, scroll all the way to the bottom, and it's going to say, hey, you're in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, or hey, you're in Oklahoma City, or hey, we know exactly where you are.
Yep.
I think if you can take that and use it to broadcast these notifications.
Yeah, really good point. Excellent point. And the gentleman's name is Vic Gandotra, and I'm embarrassed that I forgot it. But you're exactly right. There are two comments from that. The idea that your device or your internet connection can pinpoint you is very powerful, very useful. It's an automated thing, and in some ways, it is a threat to the traditional model of the broadcasters, because you don't need us. If you can say, okay, drop the pin on the map, here's where I am, and this is where the storm is, and this is where it's heading, all through automation, that's certainly valuable. Now, the automation is nowhere near perfect at this point, but it is and will continue to improve. In our defense, I think the humans can add some level of context and information and maybe even urgency to the situation that does help, that the automation can't do. And so I think we still have some value in that way. On quieter days, I think that we probably need to explore our value a little bit more, and I hate to say this out loud, but explore our value a little more as entertainers. And I don't mean necessarily that we're putting on a show, but providing interesting information. You know, I had the blessing of coming here and starting a new Facebook page, and I've been kind of doing some experiments with it, you know, because it's branded with the television station. But it's been very interesting to me to be able to start that from scratch and watch people's behavior. You know, we got into, I posted one night just a quick picture of a little hamburger joint here in town, and we were new, and one of our anchors, Daryl Franklin, said, oh yeah, you need to go to Pat's. And so I put up on Facebook a street view picture of the place, and I said, oh, hey, Daryl Franklin says go to Pat's Hamburgers. And I didn't have quite a few, I think I only had less than 1,000 people liking my page at that point, because I was brand new. And instantly, the reach number on that post went to over 10,000 people. They wanted to comment on hamburgers, and they wanted to tell me other places to go. It was great. It was great fun. But by contrast, whenever I put up the 7-day forecast on my page, the reach there, and part of this is the humans' interaction, and part of it's Facebook's algorithm. But you know, I mean, there have been days where I've had less than 100 reach on the 7-day forecast. So I wrote about this recently. I have a blog called digitalmeteorologist.com, and I wrote a post about this with some thoughts on the idea of entertaining people.
And that's definitely that I think has something I think has to be considered now, sadly, because it's now gone from more of a science and informative to now
Right.
you have to try and capture people's attention
Yes.
in relation to and kind of versus the other programs of choosing that aren't the weather.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. There was a book written some years ago, and I only got about halfway through it, by Doc Searles, who's an early internet guy. I think the name of it was called The Intention Economy. And I think he's exactly right. I think he's probably a little bit idealistic like me. But the premise is, you might remember, people might remember some years ago, and I think they're still around, but the advertisements for a website called Lending Tree, the message was, hey, send us a note, or fill out the profile on this website page, and we're going to get 4 lenders to come and compete for you for your mortgage because you want to go buy a house. And so the idea behind that is really interesting, because I don't need a mortgage broker or a mortgage or a bank every day. In fact, I only need it once in the last case, every 16, 17 years, because I don't move that often. But in order for those advertisers or those mortgage companies to get themselves in front of me, they have to continually push out advertising messages. So it's push, 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 push. Well, on Facebook, everybody gets to push stuff at you, which is how it becomes this noise and where the algorithm came from. I think the more desirable audience, even though it's smaller, is the audience that's pulling. And that's what the Lending Tree thing did. They were able to go in and say, hey, I'm ready for a mortgage. Come talk to me now. And there's the thing of brand awareness and brand ID and branding and all, and I get all that. But I think the idea of the intention economy and pulling data ultimately will prove more valuable, because as opposed to just pushing messages by people in a world of 1 million messages per minute, the audience that is coming to you to pull the data is more valuable because they are engaged in that particular message at that moment.
Yeah, and you don't want to have to ever pin 2 different forecasters against each other,
right?
Because, I mean, here in South Florida we have Channel 4, Channel 6, Channel 7, Channel 10, 4 different stations who they'll report the same thing, but you're getting it said in 4 different ways. I mean, especially for later this week, we're supposed to get lows into the 40s down here, which by Florida standards means get out the heavy jackets and prepare for the Armageddon.
Yeah.
You have them all saying, all right, we're going to get the 40s, but you have one saying, oh, we're going to get 40s and wind chills into the 30s, get ready to bundle up, or one saying, oh, hey, the warm streak's about to end, then one saying, ready for a big cool down, and then one saying, ready to be like Boston. And you have them pinning against each other, trying to push out information towards a target audience, and it's only a question of which target are they going to hit.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned South Florida. Let me turn around and ask you a couple of questions. First of all, tell me what you guys are doing at South Florida Storm Chasers.
Right now, we are I really guess you can't say small anymore. We brought together 8 chase teams from across the country to create kind of a mesonet of chasers who are working to not provide information from under the storm, but to try and gather data from under the base of a storm. And with that, it's really the push of getting away from going out chasing for means of photos to more of trying to just figure out some of the more basic things, trying to, I guess you can say, inform the audience now of, hey, this is what it's like under the storm. Here's how you can tell this, and then here's, you know, data we've been collecting.
Right. And what's the background of the teams?
Well, there's me who's studying to be a meteorologist. Matt is he's studying to be a psychologist. Athena is studying to be a geographer. Pedro is a full-time videographer and photographer when he's not chasing. And trying to think of the other guys, because there's 5 main teams that work year-round. So me, Pedro, Athena, Matt, and then what's his name? I'm so embarrassed to forget his name.
That's okay. Well, let me ask you this then, and this is a tough question to answer, and you clearly know what you're talking about, so I mean no disrespect in this. How do you justify then what you're doing, given that I don't think, based on what you said, any of you have 10 or 20 or 30 years experience? You said you were studying to be a meteorologist, and I applaud you for what you're doing. Understand where I'm coming from. But because the follow-up question is, you know, I think it's the NWA that has come up with a digital seal of approval, trying to give some level of credibility. So how would you address those comments?
I would address those comments as, you can see us as credible if you want. I mean, studying to become a meteorologist, in my terms, I'm always willing to learn. I'm always willing to take something from other people. The other guys and gals are always willing to learn something new.
Right.
But to justify that further is, you know, believe us or not, we're going to go out. We all have some experience. We all have basic meteorology and forecasting under us, you know, first aid and all that under us. And we're not pushing to give information. We're not pushing to turn around and say, hey, you know, tornado, or do this or do that. We're just pushing to try to bring numbers out to let people know.
Yeah, very good.
And especially for me, I mean, doing the podcast is one of the things that I like to do personally, because of it's a way to be more of on a personal level and seeing when I'm not pushing numbers, or I am not trying to do something more professional, or trying to produce content that is related to these numbers or the storms.
Yeah, well, I applaud you for doing it. I mean, there's a process that you go through. We all are continuously learning, but especially in the early days. I remember my other mentor back in Birmingham with James was a guy by the name of Dan Satterfield, who's now on the Delmarva Peninsula. But I remember him saying, he said, you go to school to learn for 4 years to learn meteorology, and then you spend the next 2 years after that learning how to forecast.
And there's definitely that is very true. You go, it's 4 years of just learning, this is what meteorology is, this is how the atmosphere acts in these different scenarios, and then you do have that period of time where it's all about forecasting and just trying to predict the future of it, basically forecasting. But there's also, in my belief now, with the rise of the internet and how much information is available, is now you can learn it from so many different ways, and you can not be restricted to just what you're learning in the classroom of, here's how you forecast with numbers, here's how you get significant tornado parameters using numbers. Now you can go and you can learn from one person over here saying, all right, here's one way to do it, and then another person over here saying, here's one way to do it, and then you can create your own way from it.
Yeah, very good, very wise. All right, I'll put you on the spot then, since you're in South Florida. We're in the middle of a 4-year, not in the middle, but in a 4-year level 4, stage 4 drought here in northwest Texas. And so we need a good remnant tropical system to come up and park itself for a couple of days. What's the tropical season outlook from down there?
From my perspective, and this is like one of the top questions I'm asked whenever I introduce myself as the owner and founder of South Florida Storm Chasers of, all right, when are we getting the next hurricane?
Yeah.
To me, I think, especially this year, I didn't see anything really impacting the Gulf Coast because while the Gulf is extremely open for business, and I mean, if something comes up through the Caribbean and into the Gulf, we could, I don't like to say it, we could see another Katrina because temperatures in the Gulf are extremely warm and extend to an extremely great depth. So anything that parked itself in the middle of the Gulf would only grow. But for the past 2 seasons or so, the Caribbean has just been shut down by high amounts of wind shear because of an extremely active Pacific season. And I think that not this year, but next year, we could see an active season just because of the Caribbean still needs time to take out some of those big wind shear systems that have just been parked in the middle of the Caribbean. And anything trying to go up the Caribbean has been either torn apart and then makes it to the Gulf, and by then it is just too little time. It's either getting picked up by the jet stream and thrown into Florida or getting thrown into Mexico.
Yeah. Well, and I'd be happy with a nice Pacific system. We had one that came across, I can't remember which one it was, last year. It stalled out over the Midland region for a short period of time, but helped them in their drought quite a bit. So we'd like one of those if we could do that too.
And as much as I want to say I'd love to have another storm hit Florida, I truly don't, because it's scary to think how much Florida has grown since 2005 and 2006 when we were last impacted. I mean, this year will go on 10 years since the last being hit with a hurricane. And to more clarify that, of any system with winds above 75 miles per hour, because we have taken tropical storms, but the amount of people have grown exponentially, and also you only have the local and state government pushing for be ready for 72 hours. But in the case of Wilma, I remember we didn't have power for maybe a week or 2.
Oh, yeah.
And with that also becomes the push of the population has pushed really on the beach. I remember Sandy in 2012. The beach was eroded so badly that they had to replace a section of seawall and road, and they're still fixing that to this date.
Wow.
And to think about it, if the surge had been about 2 feet higher, it would have impacted about, I'd have to say, probably $100 to $200 million houses
Wow.
that were just on the other side of that street.
Amazing.
So to think if we had a Wilma come up from the east side and hit right where Broward County and Miami-Dade County meet along the county line, it would just be utter devastation, even if it wasn't a strong storm. I mean, a Category 2 storm would do such devastation here that it would be something that have to be relatable to types of damage done by Wilma, even when Wilma came in from the West Coast.
Yeah. Well, listen, Morgan, I've got some TV commitments coming up, but I have just another moment or two, but I certainly appreciate the information. It was a great interview. You did an excellent job.
All right, thank you very much.
Sure.
And thank you for joining us. Since
My pleasure.
you have commitments, I will let you go.
Okay. Did I put Chris to sleep? I think he's back. Chris, are you there? Are you live?
Yeah, I'm here.
There he is.
I'm back. Yeah, I was going to ask you a couple questions, but then you got your TV commitment, so
I got another
maybe
minute.
we'll
Go
catch you
for it.
some other time.
No, I got another minute. Go ahead.
You being a chief meteorologist, I was just wondering, back in the days, have you ever went out in a storm chase with anybody? And if so, I wanted to know what's the worst thing you've seen. I mean, and also with you forecasting, what is your worst scenario you have ever forecasted? That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, well, as far as going out and chasing, that's one of the downsides to being on television is you end up being stuck in the studio. And so you get to see the storms from a radar perspective, and maybe if you're lucky a tower cam or whatever, some pictures or somebody's feeding something in. But yeah, we don't get to go out and chase quite as much as we might otherwise like to do. As far as worst case, depends on I guess the weather type. I was in Birmingham starting up with James during Katrina, and that was an interesting experience, certainly. Not Katrina, Andrew, I'm sorry. Because the remnants of that came over after coming inland, came over Alabama. I was in Birmingham for the blizzard of '93. That was meteorologically, it was a wonderful storm. Excuse me one second. Meteorologically, it was a wonderful storm for Birmingham. We had 13 inches of snow, and the city of Birmingham doesn't even own a plow. So while meteorologically it was really cool, it did create a lot of hardship for a lot of people, and that was pretty interesting. Shortly after I got to Richmond, we had a tornado in Petersburg, just south of Richmond. That was kind of a bad deal. It was somewhat unexpected. Not that all tornadoes have to be expected, but this setup was early in my career, and the setup was such that we probably could have done a little better job with that, and I learned a lot from it.
Yeah, I live here in London, Ohio, and I spoke to a lot of people, and it must have happened. I mean, a lot of people keep talking about the Xenia tornado, which completely wiped out the town.
Yep, and there are still scars here in Wichita Falls. They, of course, had a big one in 1979, and just driving by the mall, the big Dillards here, you can see where the bricks change from the original bricks to the ones that had to be replaced after that big tornado that just did an incredible amount of damage in this town.
All right. Well, it's nice to meet you, Kevin. I appreciate you coming on our podcast.
You guys are very professional, and I appreciate the invitation. I had a great time.
I'd like to extend the thank you, too.
All right. Well, y'all take care. Have a great night.
You too.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You too. Bye.
Well, everybody, that was Kevin out of Wichita Falls, Texas. An amazing guest on the show with us. I mean, this episode will probably go on one of my top 3 so far.
Yes, I believe. Yeah. I mean, I don't think we had any major guests yet besides this one. You'd be our top.
Well, we had Brad, we had David.
Yeah.
We had. I'm not going to say his name.
Yeah, so far we've had a few great guests.
Yeah.
So.
But, I mean, the amount of content that was discussed in this episode, I think, was really impressive. And, I mean, some of the conversations that we were able to have were just definitely something that I don't think you can really have with somebody unless it's somebody as well-informed and educated as Kevin was. And I mean, some of those conversations, especially regarding social media and how they play such a role now in the meteorological industry, is just so interesting, and it was just great.
He makes a great point, about TV, because I don't watch TV. I mean, I don't watch the news and all that. I mostly get my stuff from the social media, like the internet, like He's not very. Said it wasn't a very great source, but I mean I don't watch the news much at all.
I mean, from my point of view, I mean, being on a college campus so much of the time, the type of things that kids watch is really sad. I mean, last week? Yeah, last week, we actually had a tornado only a couple of miles from the campus of the college, and granted, there was no warning. It was a very brief spin-up, but nobody would have known about it. There was a massive storm that rolled through the campus, and there were people running around on campus, and it was just so interesting how absolutely nobody knew about what was going on. There was a severe thunderstorm warning in effect, and you had a severe thunderstorm warning, a tornado not too far away. You had all this going on, and absolutely nobody knew about it. They were just in the dark, and I think that's because, I can't say anything about social media too much because my social media feed is full of just weather. I mean, I barely follow anything outside of weather, but it's absolutely appalling how little people notice.
Were there things going off when this was happening?
What? You broke up there.
The tornado near campus. I mean, were there sirens going off or anything?
Well, in South Florida, we don't have sirens because of just the sheer fact that we don't see. Well, let me reword that. We do see tornadoes often down here. Florida's actually number 2 or 3 for tornadoes, but you also turn around and there's no type of warning system because people are used to hurricanes down here, which you have 2 days in advance. Tie down the kids, tie down the dog, get your stuff inside, watch HBO till it's over. I mean, there's not much of a warning system. It's you hope you hear about it on TV or through a phone call or a text message, and that's it. There's no other warning system other than that. I mean, I remember that day I was getting on campus, and thank God I had an amazing professor for my first class, and I looked at him and I said, listen, you just got to make sure everybody gets in here and they get inside because where it was an interior room, thankfully. And I said, get everybody inside, just make sure that they're in here, hunker them down as this stuff moves through because nobody knew what was going on. And I remember when he turns around and tells everybody to hunker down, everybody was just so skeptical about it. But then 2 minutes later when we had winds of over 40 to 50 miles per hour blow across campus, everybody was like, wow, thank you. We would have been out in that. I mean, there was flying debris and everything, so definitely something that you don't always. It's sad that a lot of people don't notice. It's sad that there isn't more of a mesonet of, more of a network to get the information across.
I think that they ought to have signs in place just to give out a warning at least, so people can take the appropriate shelter and cover. Because what if somebody out there is just walking and they don't know?
And it's between that and there's been a big push for like text message alerts and phone call alerts by the National Weather Service and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, but they really don't work. I mean, I'm signed up to get alerts sent to my phone, and I've only gotten them sent to me once. And I've been under tornado warnings and severe thunderstorm warnings and hurricane warnings, and to only have it sent to me once is absolutely appalling. And I mean, it was for the dumbest of things. It was for a flash flood warning that got canceled about 10 minutes after they sent it out to me. So,
we need something in the future to help keep these people safe.
And
you know,
yeah, it's between that, but then there's a problem with that, you know, considering that people are kind of, I don't want to say ignorant, but ignorant to the new, you know, to the idea of, you know, texting this number to get weather alerts to your phone. People are just ignorant to the idea and don't want to listen to the idea or, you know, be in with the idea. And
safety first, buddy.
yeah, it is. It's safety first, but nobody wants to do safety first. They want to do themselves first. That's all that matters to them. Is me, 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 me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like if somebody had the choice between, you know, they're playing their favorite song on their phone and getting a phone call from, you know, an automated voice from the National Weather Service saying, you know, hey, you're under a severe thunderstorm warning. You know, we know from your cell tower location that you're in the middle of it. Take cover. But, you know, it's going to interrupt your stupid favorite damn Taylor Swift song. You're going to turn around and ignore the call just so you can continue listening to T-Swift.
Good night. Good night. Are you going to bed, bud? You going on time? Good night. All right. He said good night. That was my son. Sorry.
Good night. Good night.
But oh well. But anyway,
it's only a matter of time before people eventually become open to it. I mean, Facebook announced that they're going to try and put weather and Amber Alerts on the top of everybody's news feed, but I don't think people will really be open to it because it's just something that people really don't want to do. People are extremely ignorant when it comes to the news.
No, I think that, you know, when it comes to weather, people need to pay more and more attention to it because that stuff is pretty serious stuff. You know, that's why, you know, we have excellent meteorologists. I mean, like Kevin and people out there who are out there working their butts off to help keep us safe. And but then the fact that, you know, you guys don't have tornado signs to send out a message to people, okay, there's a tornado in the area, to take cover. Hey, just a phone text message. Oh, and you know, like you said, you only got one.
Yeah, either that, you know.
How many out there?
You know, enough that I've lost count. But it's between that and, you know, you can either have a messaging service or an app such as Storm Shield app, which I encourage everybody to get, that are, you know, if you're in the middle, because they don't need to track your phone. You can tell by just triangulating cell towers to get an relatively good idea of where your location is, and with how the new warnings are of where it's, you know, by polygon and not by county, if you're gonna only get that alert if you're in that warning polygon. And I mean, apps such as Storm Shield app will just pop up a banner on the top of your screen saying, hey, you're in the middle of this, you know, take cover, or hey, this is happening, or hey, this may happen later. It's something like that. It's, you know, insane that people don't want.
Yeah. So they need to come up with a new system. You know, people need to pay more attention to that system.
Here's the thing. We can say that as much as we want. We can say, you know, they need a new system. They should come up with a new system. A new system is necessary. They need to do this. They need to do that. We can say that as much as we want, but sadly, it's not going to mean anything if people just don't want to do it, if they're just going to ignore it. I could create an app tomorrow that every single time you're in the middle of a warning polygon, and you can choose, severe thunderstorm warning, tornado warning, flash flood warning, hurricane warning, whatever the hell you want to be in. It will alert your phone and give you a text message with a brief description of what's going on as long as you sign up for the service. But people just don't want to do that because it means taking time out of their personal lives to do it. And the startup cost for it would be tremendous. And that's something that we don't have with the National Weather Service and the National Oceanic Administration, Atmospheric Administration being a part of the Department of Commerce. We're losing money for it, and they don't have $25,000 to invest on a mobile app. They have that money to invest on storm research.
And then you guys like yourselves are for more and more data on these big storms, and so in the future they can come up with this stuff and help and more advanced warnings in the future.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing. These warnings can get as advanced as they want, and I know 15 minutes doesn't sound like a lot, but for 15 minutes, if you're inside your house and you have 15-minute lead time on between now and when that tornado should be at your location, that's plenty of time for you to go grab the kids, to go grab, one or two of your favorite valuables, go grab the pets, and then jump in the storm shelter. That's plenty of time. But to people, 15 minutes isn't enough. They want 30, they want 40. But the chances of that are absolutely tremendously low. I mean, the Norman tornado, that supercell took only about 30 minutes to form. And then on top of that 30 minutes, only 15 minutes for the tornado to form on top of it. And the fact that you had that 15-minute lead time was just not enough for people. And that's just,
all I need is you tell me.
It's one of the sad things. And, until people start to acknowledge it, that's just how it's going to be.
That's true.
But
well,
that's just how it is, and we're just going to have to acknowledge it like that for the time being. And until people decide that they want to take real things seriously that really matter, I mean, we can just forget any idea of trying to bring a connected weather notification system like social media to people.
Yeah, I just have to accept the fact that that's how it is. You're right.
It's just how it is for now, for, the next 5 to 10 years until, sadly, until we get another humongous disaster on the scale of Katrina, that people are going to take notice. I mean, on the scale of Katrina or the 2011 super outbreak in Dixie Alley and up and down the Mideast, it's going to take time for people to really acknowledge it and try to really just see that it's there.
Yeah, I mean, like, people just wait until, like, the biggest thing, like, that's when people seem to finally notice, oh, these things are really serious. We need to get to these things because these weather can be destructive, and people need to take more caution to that.
Here's the thing. Any and all weather can and will be destructive. I mean, a simple rainstorm can be extremely destructive if set into the right conditions. I mean, it can go and it can no thunder, no lightning, no wind or anything, but it's just raining. 2 drops of rain can turn into 55 million, and now you have a flood. And then from a flood, you have debris and all that, and that's just what happens.
We get quite a bit of flood over here in our yard. And best time to go out hunting for night crawlers. We get quite a bit of flood in our yard.
I mean, and then another thing from that is, a simple snowstorm, and this is a shout out to Boston right now. Ooh, wow, webcam acted up there. A simple snowstorm, if given the right conditions and lasting long enough, you're going to go from, a season with 5 inches of snow to a season with 90 inches of snow. An 85-inch differential, given the right conditions.
Yep.
But
weather,
it's just how it is, and that's all you can say is that's just how it is. It's unpredictable to the point of I could be 1,000% sure that tomorrow there's gonna be a tornado. I could tell you exactly where, down to like the inch, but people are still gonna ignore what I'm saying because they think that they'll know better than me.
Until I haven't.
Well, that's the thing. Even if it does happen, even if I were to forecast it down to the inch, people would still ignore me. Even if I got it right, they'd be like, "You were flawed by about 2 centimeters, so you are now unreliable." That's just how it is.
You cannot predict the exact point.
That's the exact point of it. I mean, that's the sad fact of this internet and largely connected world that we live in now. Just how it is. But saying that, I think that's good enough to end this podcast. It's perfectly where I want it to be, which is an hour and around 15 minutes, which is exactly how long I'd like these to be. So I think we can put an end to episode 4 tonight, right now. So a huge thanks to Kevin Selle. Yes, I said it right that time. For joining us tonight. He was an amazing guest. I was saying it wrong and he corrected me. I'm like, damn it, I look bad now. And he was an amazing guest. And if you weren't here for the entire thing or you're just tuning in now, go check out the part when it gets uploaded on YouTube. Extremely interesting conversations with him. Extremely well educated. If you live in the Wichita Falls area, I greatly encourage you to watch him and KFDX. So I greatly encourage you to go check that out, as it was an amazing talk and it definitely addressed a lot of questions regarding social media and how it has an effect in kind of the meteorology industry. So, Chris, any final thoughts?
Glad we had Kevin on. Yes, very knowledgeable. I mean, could learn a lot from him. Like to have him back on. And we got many more other guests like him. So,
I fully agree with you.
Can learn a lot from him.
Big thanks to everybody for tuning in, and the next podcast episode will be the 27th. February 27th will be the next episode of the podcast. And on that episode, we actually have a very big announcement regarding our about YouTube and a couple other things that we're going to be doing. So you're going to have to wait till then to hear about it. And as Chris gets struck by lightning, I will end this episode. So thank you for joining us. We look forward to having you again. Huge thanks to Kevin Selle. Yeah, I said it. Right, yeah. For joining us. It was a great episode, and I look forward to many more like it. So thank you for joining us, and I look forward to having you next time. Goodbye.